The day third Miss Song left the capital was a rainy day. It was rumored all over the capital that she was banished to the estate because she had earned the young marquise's disgust. Because the pouch she stayed up all night, embroidering was not only ugly, but she even left a needle in it that poked the marquise's hand full of holes. And also because she lost her footing while performing a dance at the marquise's birthday banquet, knocking him straight into the pond. In short, during those years, third Miss Song did all sorts of foolish things to win the young marquise's favor. And after third Miss Song left, there was no news of her for 5 years. But recently, the Marquis has been under immense pressure from the Empress Dowager to get married. For some reason, he found himself unable to sleep night after night, disturbed by that old shadow. So he thought to himself, that girl has been in the countryside for 5 years. Her temperament should be polished by now. She can probably be my wife. The carriage rolled slowly through the sound of the rain, as the spring drizzle pitter-pattered ceaselessly. Liu Zi huddled in a corner of the carriage, peeked at the person beside him, and complained silently. Ever since the Marquis left the palace today, his face has been exceptionally grim, and he has been leaning against the carriage wall with his eyes closed. The Marquis had a cold temperament and was always a man of few words, rarely showing even a sliver of warmth to his close attendants. But was the Marquis really always like this? Raindrops hit the bronze bell on the corner of the eaves. The clear, crisp sound spread through the rainy mist. Liu Zi thought for a moment. In all these years, it seemed that only when third Miss Song was around did the Marquis show any emotion, like a living person. Although they were mostly of anger, irritation, and thunderous rage. But the Marquis at that time, he wasn't afraid anymore. Thinking of the Song family's third miss, Liu Zi couldn't help but hold back a laugh, still remembering the first time he saw the third miss. The way she was wandering around the Marquise's residence, she looked just like a persistent little sparrow, and the words that came out of her mouth were even more shocking. I am not a thief, and I am not a spy. I am the third miss of the Song family. I want to be the young Marquise's wife, so I wanted to come see what the young Marquis looks like. Liu Zi was at the side at that time, and upon hearing her words, he was so shocked that the sword in his hand almost fell out. Who didn't know that the young Marquis had always detested those who were always scheming and wanted to use him to climb higher? But she said it so blatantly, without any cover-up, that it actually threw the young Marquis off, and it took him a long while to squeeze out a sentence. Don't speak nonsense. How old are you? Probably not even 10 yet, right? The Song family. If you dare to spout nonsense again, I'll go find your older sister. The little girl's big watery eyes immediately filled with tears, which then plopped down. No, if you tell my sister, Dad will whip me with a whip. I am already very big. In another year, I'll be of marriageable age. Well, she is a little liar. Everyone in the entire capital knew. The Song family's reputation was upright and proper, and Lord Song was a key minister in the court. How could he beat his own daughter with a whip? As for the title of the Song family's third miss, he had heard of it. It was said that her birth mother was of low status, but it is not so bad that she can't get food to eat. Right? This girl in front of me is so thin. She doesn't look like she'll be of hairpin age next year. Later, Liu Zi learned that she was indeed almost of hairpin age. This third Miss Song is so small and also a bit clumsy. The ruined embroidered pouches piled up half a basket, and when she practiced dancing, she would fall and get covered in mud. But she was always smiling, saying, "It is okay, it is okay." In all the years she chased after the young Marquis, he never even gave her a kind look. Yet she was very persistent. No matter if the young Marquis scolded her, was fierce to her, or drove her away, she was too stubborn to leave. She was clearly on the verge of tears. Why wouldn't she leave? Liu Zi couldn't figure it out. He only felt that every time the third miss caused trouble, she was like a frightened quail huddled up in a ball. She was clearly scared, especially at the Marquise's birthday banquet. She excitedly said she wanted to perform a dance, but before she could do 2 steps, she knocked the Marquis into the lotus pond. She squatted by the pond, trembling with fear, yet she didn't forget to sneak a peek at the young Marquise's expression. She looked both pitiful and amusing. Even a rough man like Liu Zai couldn't bear it. But the young Marquise, with a wave of his hand, sent her away to the countryside. The village is not in peaceful times right now. The Marquise is truly heartless. She is a weak woman with no one to rely on. And now that she has been driven away by the Marquis, the people in the village probably won't treat her kindly either. Sigh, the poor third Miss How. Is she supposed to survive all these years? What are you spacing out for? The sudden question made Liu Zi's heart tighten. He looked up and saw the Marquis staring at him expressionlessly. Cold sweat beaded on his forehead, knowing he couldn't hide his thoughts, and also understanding that the Marquis had always disliked the third Miss Song. For a moment, he was in a dilemma. The carriage curtain happened to flutter. Liu Zi saw a familiar splash of goose yellow, steeled himself, and answered bracingly. Reporting to the Marquise, just now there was a girl on the street who looked a bit like the third Miss Song. As soon as the words left his mouth, unexpectedly, the young Marquise's tense expression actually softened a bit. He Zhuzhao attended a banquet in the palace today and drank a lot of wine. The Empress Dowager held his hand, her eyes brimming with tears, and spoke of that imperial uncle who died in a foreign land 5 years ago. She sighed that he had no wife and no children, not even a body was recovered, so not even a cenotaph was ever erected. So, as she spoke, she decided to arrange a marriage for He Zhuzhao. He Zhuzhao couldn't refuse and could only brace himself for the matchmaking meetings, but those carefully selected noble ladies from prestigious families, their every move was disciplined, truly devoid of any liveliness. Somehow, his mind was suddenly filled with the image of that girl from the Song family. He really didn't understand. She was just a little girl. Where did she get so much energy? Those clumsy trinkets she gave back then made those young masters bend over with laughter, and even got his own hands full of pricks. He Zhuzhao had a look of disgust at the time. He glanced at it and threw it on the ground, not forgetting to stomp on it a couple of times. But when no one was around, he couldn't help but pick it back up, as if he were a thief. He looked at it from every angle and still felt it was a complete eyesore, so he carefully placed it into a small box. He thought. He was just afraid that others would see this ugly thing and then make fun of his taste. That is all. It is not like he was actually treating this ugly thing as a treasure. Strangely enough, for some reason, every single move of that little girl from the Song family could always cause such huge emotional ups and downs for him. And yet, there was nothing he could do about her. The most infuriating part was, it was clearly she who had knocked him into the pond, forcing him to swallow several mouthfuls of water, and just as he was pulled out and about to yell at her, she looked at him with those watery eyes, as if she was the one who had fallen into the water. And so, that made him lose his temper again. That day, saying he would send her to the countryside was just something said in anger. He thought everyone present should have understood. Although he was the current Marquis, how could he have such power? Could he really just dispose of a young lady as he pleased? But the next day, she actually left. The moment he heard the news, he felt his heart sink violently, and even his breath hitched. By the time he rushed to the city gate, all that was left was swirling dust in the wind, without a single trace of her shadow. He wanted to send people to chase after her immediately, but remembering the words he had said, he sighed heavily, and could only harden his heart and turn back to his residence. Oh well, it is probably for the best to let her temperament be honed. But this honing lasted for 5 years. I wonder if the little girl now is still as reckless as she was before? And is she still a crybaby like she used to be? Oh well, it is fine if she is a bit reckless. And it is okay if she cries a little. He Zhuzhao lowered his eyes, his fingertips unconsciously caressing the pouch at his waist. The pattern on it had faded at some unknown time. These past years, life has been truly dull. He Zhuzhao only then realized that, compared to the trouble she caused by being at his side, loneliness was even harder to endure. It was more painful than the needle marks on his hand. It was colder than the chill of falling into the pond. He thought, since the little girl is so persistent, it is about time to give her a proper status. It was also not until now that he finally believed. Song Lichao would never leave Hejuzhao. She was different from her dad. She wouldn't go back on her word. Third Miss Song never lies. She would always be with him. So he spoke, his voice as soft as if it had been dampened by the spring rain. Tomorrow, make a trip to the Song families. In front of the Song mansion, an unremarkable carriage was parked. The subtle patterns carved on the carriage shaft exuded a weight that ordinary families lacked, secretive and noble. The carriage door opened gently, and a woman in plain, moonlight white robes stepped down gracefully. Her figure was slender, and before she could steady herself, a house servant from the gate had already hurried over to greet her, his tone filled with respect. "May I ask who this lady is looking for? Do you have a calling card?" "I am looking for Lord Song. I want to ask him for some things." Although the servant was a bit confused, he looked at the carriage behind me and didn't dare to be negligent in the slightest, quickly going inside to announce me. I stood outside the gate, carefully sizing up this residence I hadn't seen in 5 years. The red walls and black tiles were still the same. Even the manes of the pair of stone lions in front of the steps hadn't changed. But the blue stone slab where I had once carved small words was long since covered by new moss. Not like it was before. Soon, a large crowd of people swarmed out. The man in the lead wore a dark patterned brocade robe, his temples already touched with frost. It was Song Yuanren, my biological father. It was also him who cruelly sent me to the countryside estate many years ago, leaving me to fend for myself. When Song Yuanren saw me, his expression changed drastically, and he immediately shouted sternly, "It is you. How do you have the face to come back? Back then you offended the Marquis of Yongning's estate, so I sent you to the countryside to avoid disaster. Now you dare to show up at our door. Are you trying to drag down the entire Song family?" The dampness of spring rolled with the wind beating about without any pattern. The man in front of me was tall and handsome, with a graceful demeanor, and had an excellent reputation in the capital. No one would believe that he would beat his own daughter where no one could see. And the reason was merely a momentary lapse of control after being drunk. Even less would anyone believe that the one who was beaten was always only his youngest daughter. Because I was just a girl born to a fire-stoking maid, of low birth. Song Yuanren never liked me to begin with, but he disliked me even more for not being as talented and outstanding as my sisters, for having a personality not the least bit like his, and even for looking different from everyone else in the Song family. So he never showed me even a shred of parental love. But the younger me was even dumber than I was 5 years ago, always hoping to get a word of pity from him, a single proper look. My mother had died long ago. In this world, Dad was my only relative. So even if he would hit me, would ignore me, I still longed for a father's love in my heart. When he didn't like me, didn't pity me, and wouldn't look me in the eye, I would subconsciously feel that I wasn't good enough. If only I could be a little prettier, a little smarter. Would things be different? I admit, I am the biggest fool in the world. But back then, I was just a 14-year-old little girl. I just longed for my father to care for me a little, to get a kind word from him when I was hurt. Was that wrong too? Only later did I understand that this was also wrong. Pinning your hopes for love on the charity of others is itself a mistake. Until I was ridiculed by everyone in the capital, Song Yuanren finally saw me. The willow branches in the distance, washed green by the rain, dangled and swayed gently in the mist. Now, the rain and mist blurred my eyes, and I, in turn, could no longer see him clearly. I didn't want to cause more trouble, just said steadily, "You don't need to say anything more. I came today only to retrieve my mother's belongings." As soon as the words left my mouth, Song Yuanren snorted coldly. "Your mother was just a fire-stoking maid. What kind of keepsake could she have? If she hadn't shamelessly seduced me back then, where would you even be? You are just like your mother, always using those tricks to seduce men." And so another unbearable piece of the past buried under the dust of time surged up like a tide, overwhelming everything. I was once the Song family's third daughter, a topic of cheerful gossip for everyone in the capital. Whenever my name was mentioned in casual conversation, from the noble families with officials' tassels down to the common folks in the market, There was no one who didn't follow with a laugh. It is not that I was unaware of all this, but I still followed the young Marquis without a care, tossing away shame, tossing away self-respect, abandoning everything a young lady should have. To get close to him, I nearly exhausted all my strength. I knew full well that for someone of the young Marquis's noble birth, the only match for him would have to be a legitimate daughter from a prestigious family. I knew full well that the young Marquis only liked quiet and gentle women, yet I still clung to a slim hope. But my desperate effort to enter the Marquis's residence was not out of a desire for power and wealth. It was only because I had heard that Song Yuanren, my biological father, feared the power of the Marquis of Yongning's residence the most. He was desperate to curry favor with the Marquis's family. So I naively thought, if I could become part of the Marquis's residence, but I was really too stupid. When my sisters sat together doing needlework and embroidery, I could only tend the fire in front of the stove. My eyes filled with tears from the smoke. When they held scrolls and learned to read with the tutor, I could only squat by the well-scrubbing clothes, my fingers frozen red. So everything a girl should know, I don't know any of it. Even my ways of trying to please someone are laughably clumsy. That ugly pouch, which I embroidered until my 5 fingers were raw, only ended up disgusting the young Marquis, who then stomped it viciously on the ground. Isn't my heart just the same? Never precious, nobody wants it, and nobody will cherish it. Suddenly, I pulled away from the memories of the past. Seeing his furious and exasperated look right now, a sense of satisfaction unexpectedly rose in me, and I couldn't help but talk back. Shut up. I am no longer a member of the Song family. You can't control me anymore. If you say another insulting word about my mother, I will definitely make you pay the price. Song Yuanren values his reputation the most, so these words stabbed him right in the heart. Even if it is a daughter he doesn't want, he cannot tolerate her defying him like this. So his face instantly turned ashen, and he roared furiously. Men, seize this wicked creature for me. Send her back to the country manor, and never let her out for all eternity. Just as the servants were about to step forward, a voice suddenly came from a distance. Third Miss, is it really you? At this time of year, the capital city is always shrouded in a continuous drizzle. I stood in the small square courtyard, watching Sixth Brother's carriage kicking up dust, gradually disappearing deep into the rainy mist. Sixth Brother's words from just now were still swirling in my mind. He said that Juzhao has decided to marry me. He said he would soon go to ask the Empress Dowager to grant the marriage. Sixth Brother smiled with a face full of joy. Warmth piled up at the corners of his eyes and brows, and repeated ramblingly, Third Miss, your good days are finally about to come. I felt dizzy from what I heard, stunned for a moment. But how could he not know that 5 years ago, with the red candles burning high, I had long since bowed to heaven and earth, paid respects to the ancestors, and become another man's wife? As I was stunned, something small, warm, and soft suddenly hugged my leg tightly. Mum, who was that man just now? I chuckled and bent down, my fingertips brushing against the soft little cheek, and changed the subject in a soft voice. Just an unimportant person, that is all. Is Bauer hungry? Oh right, where's your daddy? The moment I finished speaking, a shadow suddenly fell over me. A figure in an inkwash blue robe was standing quietly in front of me, looking at me with a half-smile. My lady, the blue gauze bed curtains tonight. Jinyan was exceptionally wild. I was like a piece of rootless driftwood, rising and falling in his embrace. When the warmth and affection faded, he picked up an outer robe. He wrapped it around my sweaty shoulders and back, his palm slowly tracing my spine with a hint of nonchalance. Today, what did he say to you? That touch teased me so much my whole body went limp. I buried my face in the crook of his neck and let out a muffled hum and laugh. You mean my dad? What else could I say? I just replied with the words you taught me. You have no idea how imposing I was when I lectured him with a straight face. His face turned blue with anger after hearing it. Idiot, who asked you about your dad? He let out an exasperated laugh. his stubble brushing against the top of my head, the ticklish feeling seeping down my hair strands right into my heart. Forget it. It is too late for anything now, anyway. What is too late? I didn't understand. So I reached out and poked his firm chest. My eyes darted around, and then I thought of something else. Now that you remember everything, will you abandon me and our son? Do you take me for that stupid nephew? He tightened his arms, holding me firmly in his embrace. When I returned to the palace today, the Empress Dowager was so happy to see me. She kept wiping away tears, and when she heard I was already married, she couldn't stop grinning from ear to ear. The Empress Dowager and my birth mother were sisters in the deep palace. She dotes on me a lot. On the day of my imperial brother's birthday, I'll bring you into the palace and let her have a good look at you. I hummed a couple of times and snuggled deeper into his arms. 5 years ago, during the days when Song Yuanren sent me to the estate, the sky remained overcast for a long time. The lead gray clouds hung very low. Everyone knew I was the one cast aside by the Marquis. So here, my life was worse than that of even the lowest-ranking servant girl on the estate. They still have new clothes of coarse cloth to wear, and hot porridge and meals to eat. But I only have a drafty side room and a bowl of cold rice mixed with grit. The village is in a remote location, and most of the people there make a living by raising silkworms and weaving. The womenfolk, in particular, are all skilled in embroidery. With a flick of their fingertips, they can stitch lively patterns of butterflies playing among flowers and swallows darting through willow branches. Only I would prick my fingers several times just trying to thread a needle, let alone embroider anything decent. So they always loved to gather under the old locust tree in the courtyard to gossip. Their voices not too loud, not too soft. No wonder the Marquis never dotes on her. She can't even hold a needle steady. How is she like a proper young lady from a noble family? The way I see it, her mother died right after she was born. I am afraid she was born with bad luck. Those words were like tiny needles, densely pricking my heart. I didn't want to argue with them, so I just curled up on the hard bed day after day, watching the continuous gloomy rain outside the window. Not long after, I fell gravely ill. The high fever made my whole body scorching hot, and in my hazy consciousness, I could only feel pain in all my internal organs. None of them wanted to come near me, let alone bring me a bowl of hot soup or get a doctor to see me. When I was about to die from the fever, I vaguely heard someone speaking in a low voice outside the door. I am afraid this girl won't make it through the night. Are we really not going to do anything about her? Care about what? Didn't you hear what the butler said? She offended the Marquis, and besides, it is Master Song's intention to let her fend for herself. A voice spoke with some hesitation. But she is the Master's own child after all. Blood is thicker than water. What do you know? Another voice cut her off, its tone sarcastic. Even when a dog has a litter, there are pups they don't want, let alone people. When you have too many children, you naturally stop doting on the dumbest, ugliest, and most unlikable one. I squeezed my eyes shut, tears streaming down my face. The last glimmer of hope in my heart was extinguished. Father's doting love, the young Marquise's pity. These things I once desperately tried to hold on to. I've now given up on them completely, no longer hoping for them. My consciousness was wrapped in a warm, fuzzy fog when I heard a very light, very soft voice calling me. It was Mother. I subconsciously stretched out my arms, mumbling, "Mama, hold me," as if I had really fallen into a warm embrace. I greedily wished for time to stop at this very moment. I don't want anything anymore. I just want my mother. How I wished that Mother had taken me with her back then. She didn't know that being alone in this world is truly so hard for me. But on the second day, the fever miraculously broke. When I opened my eyes again, the rain outside had stopped, and a faint ray of sunlight shone in through a crack in the window. Finally, I saw the light. After I recovered from my illness, the people at the estate wouldn't even let me stay in that drafty side room anymore. Several burly old women pushed and shoved me out the door, throwing me onto a patch of wasteland. "Since you are a sinner who offended the Marquis, you'd better have what it takes to survive on your own. If you don't, you deserve to starve to death." I stood on that patch of wasteland, the wind whipping dust into my face, and was stunned for a moment. Raising chickens, starting fires, washing clothes, cooking meals. These were things I had long become adept at during my years in the Song Mansion. It turned out that being abandoned in this wilderness, life was surprisingly no different from my previous days in the deep-set mansion. There was also a river here. The river water was crystal clear, and when the wind blew, it would ripple with shimmering light. The reeds on the bank grew taller than a person. It was also by that river that I found Hejinian. He was covered in wounds at the time, his coarse cloth clothes soaked through with blood, his face pale with only faint breathing. While he was unconscious, his brows were constantly furrowed, and he intermittently called out for his ma. I sat by his side, listening to that cry for ma. Me nose stung. He was probably just like me, right? Unloved by his father and his mother not by his side. There was no one to ask if it hurt when he was in pain, and no one to ask if he was okay when things were hard. I searched myself for the only somewhat clean rag I had and clumsily bandaged his wounds. When he woke up, his gaze immediately fell on the crookedly wrapped rag. Me heart suddenly tightened. Instantly, I remembered the time I embroidered a sachet for the little Marquis. Back then, the little Marquis stared at the sachet for a moment, then tossed it to the ground in disgust. Song Lichao! You are so stupid! You can't even embroider a sachet! You are so stupid! You are so dumb! You are so foolish! In those years I heard too many words like that, so I just silently lowered my head. But with a hoarse voice, what he asked was, "This wound, did you bandage it for me all by yourself, young lady?" I nodded blankly. His gaze fell on the sachet, and he said in a serious tone, "Young lady, your embroidery is truly good, more practical than many other needleworks. You are truly amazing." That was the first time in my life I had ever been praised. My heart felt like it had been gently bumped by something, thumping non-stop, just like the big yellow dog in the Song Manor's courtyard back then. As long as it got a bone, it would wag its tail and prance about with joy. I touched my burning cheeks and thought, if I also had a tail at that moment, it would definitely be wagging way, way up high. He said he couldn't remember anything, not even what his name was or where his home was. I looked at the gurgling river flowing by my feet, then turned to look at him, a sudden spark of inspiration flashing in my mind. "Then let me give you a name. How about Dabao?" I haven't studied, so I don't know any fancy words. I only know that the most precious things are called treasures. Baobei. It is okay if you can't remember the past. Just keep moving forward. I just wish there was someone who could hold him dear in their heart, to dote on him as if he were a treasure. I brought Dabao back to my small, drafty mud hut, and took him in for the time being. During the day, I went to the fields to clear land, and he would sit by the door helping me gather firewood. In the evening, I'd cook thin porridge and give him the bigger half of the bowl. Dabao and the young Marquis are truly very different. The coarse rice I cooked had a burnt taste. The young Marquis would only frown and flick his sleeves upon seeing it. But he held the coarse porcelain bowl and ate until not a single grain was left. I would twirl around in the courtyard, imitating the movements of those dancing girls from memory, clumsy and without any form. But he would sit on the doorstep, his eyes shining as if they held starlight. Even my old clothes, covered in layers of patches with crooked stitches, he could study them intently for a moment. These moments are like warm, sweet water, poured spoonful by spoonful into my heart, soaking soft all the grievances accumulated over the years. Once his wounds had completely healed, he never let me touch the stove or needlework again. Only then did I realize that the food I made was truly terrible. With a flick of his fingertips, he could make fragrant wild vegetable pancakes, the grains of rice perfectly distinct, and not the least bit burnt. The dances I performed were also truly awful to watch. He casually broke off a reed stalk and practiced his swordplay in an open space, his posture as straight as a pine tree. Every move was crisp and dashing, even more handsome than the swordsman in the plays. As for the pouch I embroidered, let's not even talk about it. He picked up the needle and thread, and in just a moment he embroidered a lively little daisy, the stitches fine and neat. He said his mother wasn't very good at embroidery, but when he wore those embroidered items, they were exceptionally warm. He said that later, after his mother was gone, there was no one left to mend his clothes for him. From then on, the task of sewing his own clothes, stitch by stitch, all fell upon himself. When he mentioned his mother, a glint seemed to flash in his eyes, as if he had remembered something. But in the end, he just shook his head, saying he couldn't remember clearly. Later on, we found Xiaobao by the river. That morning, I went to from afar. I saw a wooden basin floating down the river. Only when I got closer did I discover that wrapped inside was a delicate, jade-like little baby. My heart melted at once. I carefully picked him up, the tip of my nose tingling. Is he also a child unloved by his parents? Holding the baby, I squatted by the river and couldn't help but wonder. If I was abandoned because I was stupid and unlikable, then he, so small and tender like a piece of soft jade, what on earth could he have done wrong? To be left to drift in the river all alone like this. When Dabao came looking for me, he saw me holding the baby, staring into space. He walked over and squatted down beside me, his fingertips gently touching the baby's tiny fist. I looked up, my eyes brimming with tears, and said softly, "How about we raise him? He doesn't have a mother to love him, so I'll be his mother. Let's call him Xiaobao. From now on, he'll take my surname." His brow twitched when he heard that. Xiaobao, finally. He seemed to have made some sort of decision and steeled his heart. All right, I'll be his father. My mind exploded with a bang and started buzzing. What he said. What did he mean? Did it mean what I think it means? Suppressing the turmoil in my heart, I took Xiaobao back to the room and settled him down, then followed him towards the riverbank. The wind blew over, carrying water vapor. But neither of us spoke, and only silence spread between the two of us. The river water at our feet kept flowing, shimmering with flecks of light, silently streaming past the rocks. In the end, he was the one who spoke. "Li Chao, is there any young man you fancy? If not, what do you think of me? Will I do?" I was startled, my heart pounding like a rabbit in my chest. Actually, I wanted to say that there was someone in my heart, the young Marquis. But when the words reached my lips, I couldn't get them out, and only tears kept streaming down. The ripples on the river swayed gently, reflecting the last rays of sunset in the sky, and also reflecting my tear-stained face. I clutched his sleeve, crying until I couldn't breathe, and poured out all the grievances from all these years in one go. I talked about the young Marquis's disdain, my father's neglect, and how the people in the manor made things difficult for me. Finally, I asked him through my sobs, "Am I really that bad? Am I not worthy of being liked? I've also thought about changing, becoming like eldest sister, proficient in all kinds of poetry and songs, or like second sister, decisive and ruthless. But I can't do it. I am who I am. How can a crow turn into a phoenix?" I cried so much that in the end, even I got annoyed with myself. He finally spoke, with a hint of resignation. "All right, stop crying." I looked at him, sniffling. He paused for a moment, plucked a blade of grass by the river, not looking at me. His voice soft. "I'll marry you. Isn't that enough? I don't want anyone's pity." I shoved him away forcefully, my tears falling even harder. "You are just like them. You think I am pitiful too, don't you?" I turned and ran, the wind stinging my face. He quickly caught up to me, gently grabbing my wrist from behind, his tone urgent. "Who said it was pity? Li Chao, you are great." He turned my body around, seriously counting. "You know how to raise chickens and feed them until they're nice and fat. You know how to cook. You can even make brown rice smell delicious. You are kind-hearted. You were willing to take me in when you saw I was injured. And you are also very real. You cry when you cry. You laugh when you laugh. Never hiding yourself. Most importantly, you have a heart like a pearl." I listened in a daze, my tears gradually stopping. So I actually have so many good points. I sniffled, looking at him as I hesitated to speak. Can you say that again? He smiled, reached out to wipe the tears from my face, and nodded in response. If once is not enough, I will say it 10 times, 100 times, until we are old. Li Chao, you just stay this way. You don't need to change. This innocence of yours, I will protect it from now on, okay? And later? Well, later on, whether it was my father or the young Marquis, I had forgotten all about. In my heart, there is only Dabao and Xiaobao. When He Zhao first heard that Song Zhenju had returned to the capital, he ordered people to rush make a wedding dress that very night. A hint of surprise surfaced in his eyes. This little miss had returned to the capital, yet she didn't come looking for him right away. He Zhao lowered his eyes, the corner of his forehead tightening. It wasn't like this before. The third Miss Song of the past always revolved around him. When he went to the study, she would squat by the foot of the wall with a piece of osmanthus cake, her eyes brimming with a smile the moment she saw him. He went to the racecourse to ride a horse. She then lifted her skirt hem to chase, her voice as crisp as a jujube covered in morning dew. Even that one time he was dragged by his friends to go boating on the lake, when he saw from afar the figure playing the chin on the painted boat. He knew it was her. Such clumsy zither playing you couldn't find a second in the whole capital city. Fingertips always pressing the wrong strings. The zither's sound suddenly high and suddenly low, like a kitten's paw scratching at one's heart. The friends around him at the time laughed at him for being pestered by a little tail. He had a stern face at the time, scolding her for being noisy. Seeing the little girl lower her eyes, he was secretly annoyed with himself. Lying in bed at night, he couldn't help but curl his fingers, gently tapping the silk quilt to the out-of-tune rhythm from that day, thinking about the tips of her ears turning red with concentration as she played. The corners of his mouth quietly curled up. But every time He Zhao wanted to get closer to her, he would deliberately put on an impatient look. What if she is also like Dad back then, just saying nice things to trick him? When he was 8, Dad smiled and touched his face, said he'd be right back, and then dumped him in a mass grave. There were dead bodies everywhere. He curled up in a corner and waited for 3 days, counting them. But after 3 days, what came wasn't Dad, but the fact that all his relatives were dead. He watched those familiar faces turn ice-cold, trembling all over with fear. You clearly promised not to leave him. Why did you go back on your word? Why did you leave him all alone? From then on, He Zhao was afraid to ever again believe anyone's "I won't leave," afraid of those sweet-sounding words, afraid of that clingy closeness, afraid that in the end, it would all be for nothing again. That is why he always acted impatient towards her. The handkerchief she gave him, he casually tossed onto the corner of the desk. But she couldn't help, when no one was around, repeatedly caressing the pear blossom embroidered on the corner of the handkerchief. She pestered him, wanting to learn horseback riding and archery from him. He deliberately spurred his horse to run far away, but quietly slowed down at the turn, looking back to see if she had followed. He wanted to get closer, but was afraid that if he did, she, like his father, would promise not to leave, only to turn around and disappear without a trace. So it wasn't until now that he stupidly realized his heart was already completely filled with that little girl. But for some reason, He Zhao had been feeling a bit flustered these past few days. He Zhao, in the end, was no longer sure. Is she still that same silly girl from back then? It wasn't until Liu Zi came to report that he had seen her at the gate of the Song Manor that He Zhao's heart, which had been anxious for days, finally settled like a dropped stone, and he breathed a light sigh of relief. He adjusted his headdress and sash in front of the bronze mirror. The young man in the mirror had clear and handsome features, with a hint of tenderness hidden in the corners of his eyes and brows, that he himself hadn't even noticed. The Song family, after all, still cherished the bonds of kinship. See, they still took her back, didn't they? Those rumors about her being abandoned at the estate by Lord Song were most likely false. He Zhao felt relieved. He knew it. How could any father truly have the heart to abandon his own daughter? Even those words she cried back then, "He Zhao, I don't like you anymore," were likely just words said in a fit of anger. She is just a kid, throwing a little tantrum is all. Just as his brow smoothed out, his heart was once again entangled in chaotic thoughts. His parents had passed away early, and the Empress Dowager was his closest relative in the world. Asking her to arrange the marriage couldn't be more appropriate. Besides, the Emperor's birthday banquet was a must-attend event, and he also heard that the imperial uncle, who was supposed to be long dead, had actually returned to the capital. This was a very good opportunity. I just wonder if that little girl will forgive me so easily. But at this moment, there was an inexplicable feeling of constriction, as if a ball of wet cotton was stuck in my chest. Just as he was pondering, Liu Zi crashed in the door, panting heavily, his voice trembling. "Young Master 3rd Miss Song's residence is empty," the people inside said. "She left early in the morning." A buzz went off in He Zhao's head. He didn't even have time to put his outer robe on properly as he strode outside, kicking the doorsill with the tip of his shoe, yet completely unaware. He rushed all the way, his heart feeling like it held a ball of fire, burning him into a panic. Is she leaving again? This time? Where is she going? The entrance to the residence was quiet. The vermilion lacquered main gate was ajar. On the stone steps out the courtyard gate, a young child with his hair in top knots was squatting, head down, fiddling with a few small stones with his fingers. When he saw He Zhao approaching, he lifted his small face and looked at the newcomer with curiosity. He Zhao was stunned for a moment, his voice a little hoarse when he spoke. "Kid, do you know where the people in this house have gone?" The young child raised his chin with a milky voice and answered crisply. "My mom went into the palace." He Zhao's heart suddenly sank, countless thoughts churning in his mind. Is this child's mother Song Li Chao? She is already married. Is she still blaming me? I really lost her for good. But on second thought, he frantically denied it. What if it is not her? This is just some servant's child. His heart felt like it was being squeezed by an invisible hand. It hurt so much he could barely breathe. He Zhao squatted down, trying his best to soften his tone. "Then your mom. What is her name?" "My mommy's name is Song Li Chao." As the child spoke, he fumbled out a wrinkled sugar cake from his clothes and handed it to him. Mommy said, "If I meet a handsome uncle, I should share my sugar cake." He Zhao didn't take the sugar cake. His gaze fell on the child's small hand. It was a thin hand, with a bit of dirt in the seams of his fingers, clearly from playing outside for a long time. He suddenly remembered that Song Li Chao used to be like this. Her little hands would be all dirty, yet she dared to grab his sleeve directly, pestering him and asking, "He Zhao, look at the little butterfly I caught. He Zhao, look at the new sachet I embroidered." He forced himself to stay squatting, trying his best to make his voice sound a little gentler. "What is your name?" "My name is Song Xiaobao." He Zhao's eyes suddenly burned. His heart felt as if it had been doused with scalding water, both sour and painful. This child, he actually didn't take his father's surname. He thought of the rumors about the estate. He thought of her red, swollen eyes from crying when she left back then, and thought of how she might be alone in the palace right now, facing those unknown people and matters. She must have been terribly wronged to be with her child without even a stable place to live. Even the child's surname could only be hers. So it turned out. His shrinking back for fear of being let down, those disguises of feigned impatience, all became the reasons for her to bear the hardship alone. He was the one who forgot. She is also a girl who needs someone to protect her. She gets scared too, and feels pain too. A scene suddenly appeared in He Zhao's mind. It was Song Li Chao, holding the child at night, secretly crying. He Zhao couldn't bear it anymore. He stood up and raised a hand to wipe the corner of his eye. He took the sweet cake and carefully tucked it into his bosom, as if he were carrying some priceless treasure. Be good, I am going to find your mother. From now on, I won't let you and your mother suffer anymore. Then he turned around and mounted his horse. The horse's hooves beat rapidly on the bluestone road, galloping towards the palace gate. This time, he would never let go again. Even if Song Liqiao had been married and had another man's child. It was fine. He would treat the child as his own. He had to find her and tell her that wedding stole brocade was still there. He was still here, and from now on, he would never let her be alone again. The lamps of the palace banquet hung from the beams, streaming over the pearl and jade ornaments at the Empress Dowager's temples. She held my hand, her smile kind and gentle. You keep this pair of jade pendants. The Empress Dowager gently pushed the brocade box in front of me. These belonged to Jinnian's mother consort back then. That child has had such a hard life suffering from the cold in the cold palace since he was small. His mother consort passed away early, and I could hardly protect myself back then, so I wasn't able to look after him much. She paused, her gaze falling on He Jinnian, who was not far away. But thankfully, he has you now. You are a good girl, and only you can make him come alive, like a real person. In the past, Jinnian also used to smile a lot. His lips would curve for anyone he met. But that smile was just plastered on his face. His eyes were empty, without a trace of mirth. It is nothing like now. When he looks at you, his eyes light up, and his smile comes from the bottom of his heart. It is so reassuring to see. She changed the subject, sighed softly, and brought up another name. As for Zhu Zhao, he, like Jinnian, grew up steeped in hardship. It is just that Jinnian smiles at everyone he meets, while Zhu Zhao is cold to everyone, wrapping himself in a shell. The Empress Dowager's voice lowered, filled with tenderness. Actually, Zhu Zhao is a foolish child. Back then, he lost the girl he held dearest, and he shut himself away, becoming all alone. He is not a bad person. He is just clumsy with his words. The feelings in his heart get stuck in his throat, and he can never say them out loud. He is just scared of bearing his heart again, only to end up with nothing. Before she could finish speaking, He Jinnian had already taken half a step forward and gently interrupted. Your Majesty, the Empress Dowager, the banquet is about to begin. You should return to your hall to change. We have troubled you for long enough today. We shall take our leave now. The Empress Dowager looked at him, waving her hand with a smile. Go on. Don't miss the festivities at the banquet. He Juzhao adjusted my cloak for me, his fingertips secretly brushing against the back of my hand, and held my hand a little tighter. After leaving the side hall, we had just taken a few steps when a palace attendant hurried over and whispered in He Jinnian's ear. His brow furrowed slightly, and he turned to grab my wrist. I'll be right back. You be good and wait for me here under the corridor. Don't go anywhere. Got it. I nodded at him, watching his figure disappear around the corner. I then squatted down to watch the ants in the cracks of the green bricks carrying pastry crumbs. Just as my fingertips touched the cool surface of the bricks, a pair of black, cloud-patterned boots suddenly stopped before my eyes. It was Dad. His face was livid, and he looked around. You rebellious son, how did you sneak in here? You disgraceful thing. Wasn't it enough for you to trail after the young marquise back then? Now you've even come to the palace to suck up to the powerful. You are simply shameless. How did I give birth to an evil spawn like you? I should have strangled you in your swaddling clothes back then. I had told myself long ago. The coldness of the Song Manor, the wickedness of Song Yuanren, all of it should be forgotten. In fact, the love He Jinnian has given me over the years had already made me forget all this pain. Now, I won't be sad about this at all. But my tears just wouldn't listen. Splatting onto the bricks, they bloomed into small, wet marks. All the tough words He Jinnian taught me are now stuck in my throat, like waterlogged cotton. Can't spit them out, can't swallow them down. Just at this moment, my lady, what are you doing here? my family's private matter. I am just teaching my daughter a lesson. Private matter. Jinian took half a step forward, glaring down at him condescendingly. His presence so oppressive one could hardly breathe. Disciplining my consort. When did that become your private matter? You say she is shameless? Who was it back then? Who, to curry favor with the powerful, deliberately pushed her onto Heju Zhao to be his attendant? And who was it, when she was neglected by the He family, who threw her in the woodshed and didn't even give her a hot meal? Dad's face instantly turned deathly pale, his lips trembling. I was doing it for her own good. For her own good? Jinian scoffed. For her own good. You'd say something like you should have strangled her back then, for her own good. You'd come running to curse her for being a disgrace now that she has received royal honor? He turned sideways, shielding me behind him, his gaze sweeping over the colleagues who had gathered around, and said in a clear voice, "Everyone, please look. This is how good Lord Song is to his daughter. He uses his daughter as a stepping stone, and when she is no longer useful, he casts her aside like a worn-out shoe, even speaking ill of her. Is this the moral conduct of a court official?" Dad was trembling all over, sweating profusely, wanting to defend himself, but he didn't know where to start. My princess consort, since the corridor, it was dead silent. Everyone's eyes were fixed on Dad. Some were probing, some mocking. Everyone took their seats one after another. Jinian wiped away my tears, seeming to know what I was thinking, and comforted me softly. It is not your fault that you cry easily, and it is not your fault that you can't say these harsh words. If you could do it all, what is the use of having me? Li Chao, never belittle yourself or look down on yourself, you know? I nodded lightly. Just as I was about to speak, a clear and somewhat urgent cry suddenly rang out. "Imperial grandmother, your grandson wants to marry someone. I beg you to arrange the marriage for your grandson." Hearing this, the Empress Dowager's crow's feet crinkled as she smiled. "Today is..." "What? That girl you mentioned? Has she had a change of heart?" "Oh right, Zhao, come over here first, and pay your respects to your imperial aunt." The moment the words, "imperial aunt" landed, Zhao suddenly raised his head and looked at me. Our eyes met. The light from the palace lantern fell into the depths of his eyes, creating a watery shimmer. "Mom, who is that person outside?" As the rain slanted down in a fine weave, Bauer's round eyes were glued to my face. His childish voice rapped in the damp air. At yesterday's banquet, Zhao was silent for a long while, before arduously spitting out that congratulations. Even the Empress Dowager could tell something was wrong, her gaze shifting back and forth between us. But in the end, she didn't ask anything. She just sighed softly. And this morning, just as the sky was beginning to lighten, Zhao was standing outside the courtyard gate, waiting from the morning light until this drizzling spring rain. He was still clutching that sachet in his hand the entire time. Jinian sat under the corridor, nonchalantly shelling broad beans with a book spread open in front of him. Seeing me look at him, he said in a frank tone, "If you want to go, then go. It is good to make things clear." Bauer scooted over and poked the pages of the book with his little finger. "Dad, your book is upside down." The tips of his ears instantly turned bright red, and he hurriedly grabbed a broad bean and stuffed it into Bauer's mouth. "What do little kids know? Hurry up and eat." I smiled, looked again at the gloomy weather outside, and went out anyway. Outside the courtyard gate, Zhao stood in the spring rain, most of his face buried in the shadow of the eaves. The moment I stepped out the door, he moved, tilting his body slightly, afraid the fine rain would splash onto me. My heart suddenly warmed. The him from before, he used to be this thoughtful too. Yeah, the reason I fell for him back then was this very thoughtfulness. That year, I was being chased and beaten by my dad, hiding in a corner secretly wiping away my tears. Others either passed by to watch the commotion or pretended not to see. Only He Juzhao silently handed me a clean handkerchief. In the years that followed, whenever he showed even the slightest hint of such tenderness, maybe it was him silently holding an umbrella behind me on a rainy day, or the pastries quietly left on my windowsill when I was hungry, I was like a drowning person grabbing onto driftwood, clutching it tightly, refusing to let go. After all, for a person trapped in a black hole for years, even the faintest bit of warmth would be treated as a life-saving light. But He Jinian is different. The love he gives me is too full. Unlike He Juzhao's sporadic light, he is like a warmly burning stove in the winter. Bit by bit, he has thawed the chill in my bones, letting me know for the first time that being loved can be such a secure and warm thing. And I've finally come to understand that love is never something you beg for on your tiptoes. A gentle breeze blew past. He Juzhao finally spoke, his voice so hoarse it was as if covered by a layer of sand. Li Chao, for all these years, I've owed you an apology. Your sincere heart back then. I was blind and foolish, unable to see it for what it was. It was I. He lowered his eyes, his tone filled with self-mockery. I don't expect you to forgive me, much less expect you to come back. The imperial uncle is a very good person. He will protect you well, and you will be happy. Before he could finish, he abruptly looked up. A panic I had never seen before swirled in his eyes, as if someone had prodded his most painful scar. But Li Chao, I didn't mean it. It is the trauma my father left me with back then. It is too deep. I can't help but be afraid. I am scared. I am scared you'll leave me. I was just so scared. If it weren't for what happened back then, I wouldn't be like this, and I wouldn't have missed my chance with you. I think I'll never be able to fall in love with anyone again. His voice trailed off, laced with the dejection of someone who has given up on everything. This is the retribution I deserve. I am destined to walk this path alone. After Dad passed away, I knew long ago that on the road ahead, it would just be me. I looked at the sorrow in his eyes and gently shook my head. No, that can't be your excuse. He Jinian also lost his own mother at a young age and survived all those years in the cold palace. So, why can he still treat people with a warm heart? Because you two are different. He Juzhao, you are selfish. You only love yourself. You are only afraid of getting hurt yourself. And that is why you treated me that way. But He Jinian is different. He is more afraid of others getting hurt, so you two will always make completely different choices. He froze suddenly, closed his eyes, and his Adam's apple bobbed. Yeah, it was me who was too stupid. I was clearly holding a pearl back then, but I treated it like a piece of gravel. I just watched him quietly, my heart calm and ripple-free. It was as if liking He Juzhao was already something from a past life. He suddenly thought of something, and abruptly raised his head to ask, "Your dad, did he really hit you back then?" I looked up at him, not saying a word. He gave a bitter smile, raindrops falling on the tips of his hair. I understand now. From now on, I won't let anyone bully you again. When the news came that a drunk He Juzhao had beaten up my dad, I was sitting by the window, tidying little Bao's collar. The sunlight fell between the stitches, so warm it was a little dazzling. I heard people say that He Juzhao was dead drunk that day and actually whipped Dad for a long time. While hitting him, he kept saying things that others couldn't understand. After he sobered up, he said he had drunk too much and couldn't remember what had happened at all. When Dad was sent back to the manor, his whole body was covered in injuries. At night, he ran a fever, alternating between hot and cold, and finally went mad with fear. And the young Marquis, because of this incident, was stripped of his title and banished to a remote fiefdom. Some say that on the day he left, his luggage was empty, and he was only holding a freshly plucked pear branch. Listening to all this, I felt neither the satisfaction of great revenge nor a single bit of pain from the connection. My fingertips brushed over the neat seams on Xiaobao's lapel. So the hatred that had weighed me down for so many years had long since, in the day-to-day stability, quietly dissipated. I have truly let it go. He Jinian, on the other hand, came back from outside, and as soon as he entered, he slammed his folding fan on the table, his handsome face flushed red. That He Juzhao, he actually beat us to it. Our original plan is completely ruined. He paced back and forth, his tone full of unwillingness. Finally, seeing me with my eyes lowered and not speaking, he softened his voice and reached out to tuck the loose strands of hair by my temples. Forget it. It is not like it hurt you or me, so let him do what he wants. Now, there are no more grievances in the capital. How about I take you and Xiaobao to Jiangnan? Wasn't your mother from Jiangnan? Let's go to your mother's hometown, shall we? Jiangnan, such a faraway place. Such an unfamiliar name. I lifted my eyes, which were covered with a film of moisture. Okay. The sky turned overcast in the afternoon. Before leaving, I decided to go visit my mother's grave. This was the first time I had come to my mother's grave. In the past, Song Yuanren wouldn't utter a single word about mother, let alone tell me where she was buried. In those years, even when I wanted to find a place to pay my respects, I was like a blind person unable to find their way. Thankfully, there was He Jinian. He asked around and investigated everywhere for me, and finally helped me find my mother's grave. But I didn't expect to see a strange man standing in front of the overgrown, weedy grave. He was wearing a faded blue cotton shirt, his hair was messy, and he stared blankly at the tombstone. He kept muttering, "Eh-he, eh-he." The old man tending the graves nearby sighed and said to us in a low voice, "This man has had a truly bitter life." Back then, he and a girl named Ahi were deeply in love and about to get married, but she was snatched away by a powerful man. The girl had a fiery spirit and even threatened suicide, but later, to save her beloved's life, she gave in. I heard that the girl later died in childbirth after having a daughter. After that, this man went mad. He comes here every year to keep watch, saying she loved how peaceful and quiet this place was. But tears fell like pearls from a broken string, landing on the green grass in front of me. Ahi, that was my mother's pet name. So mother had been bearing so much unknown suffering all those years. Everyone who mentioned her always did so with a disdainful tone. She is just a kitchen maid, that is all. But they forgot. A kitchen maid is also a living human being, who has the autonomy to say yes or no, the right to choose her own life. Only at this moment did I understand why Song Yuanren had hated mother so much all these years, and by extension, me. The root of it was here. What he hated was that a girl of lowly birth dared to stand up straight and say no to the powerful and noble. What he is afraid of is this kind of courage that is neither servile nor overbearing, because he himself has never had it. That is why he has to desperately slander and hate, to cover up the cowardice deep in his heart. My eyes reddened, but I smiled and raised my head. So I have a mother like this. She lived more uprightly and bravely than many people who live in luxury. I am proud of her, very proud. He Jinian held my swaying body and said softly, "Li Chao, don't cry anymore. I'll take you back to your mother's hometown. There are mountains and rivers there, and the pear tree your mother planted when she was a child. We'll take Xiaobao and live a peaceful life there." Xiaobao at some point had grabbed the corner of my clothes. He rubbed his little head against my hand and said in a childish, milky voice, yet was incredibly serious, "Mom, Xiaobao is going too. Wherever Mom is, Xiaobao will be." The wind carrying bits of grass swept over the grave mound. I felt the hole in my heart being filled to the brim by He Jinian's warmth and Xiaobao's little hand. The bitterness buried in the years. It seemed to finally dissipate with this gust of wind. I raised my hand to wipe away the tears from the corner of my eyes, smiling as I tugged at He Jinian's sleeve. "I have a secret to tell you two." Before the words were even out of my mouth, two heads, one big and one small, immediately leaned in. After just a few seconds of silence, Two joyous shouts suddenly erupted on the lawn. I am going to be a dad again. I am going to be a big brother. The next second, Jinian lifted Xiao Bao over his head, letting him ride on his own shoulders, and spun around in circles on the soft grass. Xiao Bao's laughter was like a handful of scattered, crushed sugar, mingling with the fresh scent of the grass blades as it drifted far away. The reed bed not far away was rustled by the wind, shaking out layers upon layers of green waves. Mom, look, I am very happy now. You have to be happy too.